Oh, 2020 was a wealth of learning, both from a social aspect, from an academic aspect, from anything that you can imagine that deals with people and systems. One of the biggest things that we learned is how people can come together and support each other in a time of need or crises. Take, for instance, in our religious or church services, when you have a mixed congregation of older saints and younger saints, the younger saints rallied behind the older saints to make sure that technology was at the fingertips of the older saints. And I thought that was incredible. The racial unrest and racial equity has risen to the top based on what has happened across the nation, and then also bringing it all the way home to our local communities. What affects us nationally, what affects us across the street, affects us right here in our own front yard. And so during the time, I suppose, of just one event after the other, from George Floyd to Breonna Taylor, just different things that made us think and see, I guess, differently, or at least with a new set of eyes about what goes on in our community. I remember the Ahmaud Arbery incident that many people in the neighborhood or many people in the community just started walking on behalf of Ahmaud Arbery. And so some of these things built a conversation, specifically in the neighborhoods that we walked in. It built a conversation among our community, those that we share the community with. And that conversation hopefully leads to deeper conversations, which eventually will lead to healing. All of that to say this: I think that at the same time that we had social unrest, we were in the middle of a pandemic. And so it was almost like this powder keg that exploded, to where not only did you want to get outside of your home and be in the open air and in the community, you also were among other people that were walking and in the walking with you in the community. And so those conversations began.
2020, by my account, was a most interesting year. Something I don't know that I'm sure that I've never experienced, but I don't know that anybody has ever experienced. It was kind of a year of dichotomy, where there were highs, there were lows, a year of change, where that it forced us out of our comfort zone. And there's a lot of good came out of 2020, and a lot of bad came out of 2020. Some of the good that came out of 2020, I believe, were families were forced, because of the conditions of COVID-19, families were forced back together in houses because of the environment and not wanting to catch COVID. We were quarantined together. And I noticed something throughout the community. There's a group of guys that I walk with from time to time, and we walk around the Kenyan lakes. And I noticed that families started coming out in different times, especially on the very nice days, and we're walking together. And so there was a connection of couples, there were a connection of families, and it forced us out of our normal routine of just going to work, going home, and being tired, and wake up, repeat cycle. So that was a beautiful thing. I believe that it forced us to reevaluate where we were and what we do, and to come to grips with some things that are negative in our lives, and maybe even change a few things. One of the biggest challenges was the lack of fellowship that we grew accustomed to as a church, as a body of believers. We are used to coming together, multiple times a week, and seeing each other, greeting each other, loving on each other, and worshiping together. And because of COVID, many churches were shut down or had to socially distance. You couldn't hug, you couldn't, there was no handshaking. But on the flip side, it also forced us out of our comfort zone to do some things that reach the world, because the church is not a body that should be enclosed in four walls. It is a body that I believe should be stretched throughout the length and breadth of the world. And so ministry is about reaching others, not just connected to you, but reaching those that are unconnected and drawing us together as a body.
One thing that I take pride in is the support that our district, our schools offer for our families. Many of our families were very dependent upon school breakfast and school lunch. And so that's another thing, for my kids to not have a meal at school, it's okay because they have access to meals at home. However, there are many, many children and students in our city who depend on school meals. And so 2020, I think, also taught us, yes, many of our students and families didn't right away have access to either technology or the internet, but also the whole food component. And so our schools definitely played a large part in bridging that gap to help get needs, to help meet needs for our families. There were some great things that occurred in 2020. One, because we were at home for so long, for my family, it brought us together. We literally started biking together again for entertainment. And we hadn't done that since the kids were little, piled up on the sofa and really connecting. And for our family in particular, we really value our prayer time and our time refocusing and setting goals and figuring out what is the why in all of this. And so we would come together and journal and really have our Bibles out and say, okay, Ashton, Addison, Harrison, what is God speaking to you as far as why we're going through this? And from their perspective. And Ben and I really try to listen to their hearts and their opinions in all of it. Honestly, I knew our country was divided. Growing up in a Black home, these issues have been talked about. Racial issues, it's an ongoing conversation when you grow up in a Black home about working harder, working smarter, be cognizant that this racial injustice exists, be cognizant and be aware that you might feel uncomfortable in this situation, but push past it. You might be the only Black person in a room. Push past those feelings. Still look your best, do your best, speak your best. So I've known all along that there is a racial divide, but honestly, 2020 really solidified that, dang, there is a racial divide. And still in 2020, when are we going to get over this? When are we going to get past this? So it has been encouraging to have white friends and white allies that have spoken up and have said, you know what, enough is enough. This is, I'm not okay with being silent. So during when Ahmaud Arbery was murdered, my family and I, we actually, they had a challenge to go walk your neighborhood or run. And of course we chose to walk instead of run because my knees just aren't the same. But anyway, we walked, and what started off as, I don't know, it could have been a 15-minute walk. It was a couple of hours. And we really had to process that with our kids. And we posted it because we felt like that the community at large need to hear the purity of our kids' hearts. And I think the best conversation was when we turned off the camera. And honestly, for me, it clicked that, okay, now I'm the student learning from my kids. And they're able to school me into, you know, how to navigate race and how to navigate, you know, just so many difficult feelings that they were feeling. Just being revolutionary in 2021. And maybe part of it is Vice President Kamala Harris.
Yes.
Winning. You know, she didn't just shatter glass ceilings, but she completely destroyed them. And, you know, however you feel politically, and this is what I have, you know, just shared with different educators, we cannot deny the fact that this is a Black woman of who also is of Indian descent, who attended an HBCU, historically Black college and university. So she definitely shed a lot of positivity and love going that way. I believe she attended Howard University. She worked her tail off and had a very successful degree as an attorney and all of what that entails. And also in just reading about her life, her parents were activists, you know, her mom. And so she grew up really understanding and recognizing the power of her voice. And so for me, 2021, you know, we've already had our, you know, first Black president, and I do emphasize first. And now we have a Black vice president. Man, you know, honestly, it just feels like the sky is the limit. And so, again, you know, I may or may not even agree with every political decision and policy. However, I definitely feel that there's a new page turned, a new chapter, and feel very, very hopeful for 2021.
Siempre salimos con las preguntas sociales. ¿Cómo nos está yendo socialmente? Para decirles unas fechas para que se acuerden. El 27 del año 1918, agosto el 3 del año 2019. Now, to our non-speaking Spanish audience, did I make you feel bad, or how did you feel about the conversation starting in Spanish? Were you prompted to say, speak American? Because that's what I've heard before. Social media, we're so influenced by social media. You know, I've seen clips of people being berated, people being made feel bad because they're communicating with their beloved ones, sometimes with their grandchildren in Spanish, and somebody in the background is telling them, hey, you're in America, speak American. I've yet to figure out what speak American means. You know, speak English, hey, great. But we always talk about and we always hear, I've got the freedom of speech. So does that apply only to when your speech is in English? And I'll share some dates with you. September the 27th, 1918. August the 3rd, 2019. And I'll get back to the significance of these dates. I like to study history, because as I always say, if you don't study history, you're probably going to repeat it all over again. And I'm going to be throwing some numbers at you, some dates. But Spanish speaking, let's continue talking about Spanish speaking. About you're in America, speak English. Have you thought about the last time that you drove down a street with a name in Spanish? When you go to a restaurant, you order your tacos, you order your meals, you order your breakfast, you're speaking Spanish. When you drove down the street, the vehicles you were driving, there's a Santa Fe, there's a Carrera by Porsche, El Camino by Chevrolet, there's an Armada by Nissan. But yet, some people, and I would like to think not in Lubbock, but I'm sure it's happened. I used to get criticized growing up because of my accent, my broken English. If you walk down to really any store, and if you really pay attention to the conversation, somebody is being made fun of because of their broken English, or they can't speak English at all. And I'm wondering, why would you do that? To humiliate or make fun of somebody, of anyone? That's just not right. We here in the city of Lubbock, for example, a good example of equity, we've got 2,360 full-time employees. And some of these employees are civil service. We've got 4.3% African Americans working here in Lubbock. We've got 29.2% Latinos. Supervisors. We've got 654 employees with the title of supervisors. We've got 2.4 African Americans that are in supervision. We got 20.3 Hispanics in supervision. Now let's go back and look at these dates I mentioned there at the beginning of this. I said September 27th, 1918. Significance? It's a little bit of history. A little city in Porvenir, Texas, in the Marfa area. I won't say who did it, but they were law enforcement. They were the Texas Rangers back during that era. They decided to go in and make an example out of the Mexican Americans that lived in that little city because some Mexicans from across the border came across and sold some cattle or some horses, livestock, took them across the border. Well, they came in at night, did a raid, woke up some people, put them out in public, and executed them. Now, I mentioned August the 3rd, 2019. 100 years later, now I don't know how many of you, if that date I just mentioned, if you recall what may have happened, but this happened in El Paso when I won't even mention his name, he doesn't deserve it, where he traveled across state to El Paso and executed 23 people 100 years later. Lubbock was incorporated in 1909. Took 70 years for the Lubbock Cemetery to become fully integrated. Not anymore. I mean, 70 years later, get fully integrated. 1984, the first Hispanic, the first Black person was elected to serve on our city council. 1984, do the math. But we're not there anymore. We've become very progressive. We've become very innovative. And I'm very happy to say that I really enjoy being a part of this group, the innovative, progressive thinking of City Council. I learned that we're a very resilient, progressive city. This pandemic that hit Lubbock, and again, I give the credit to our first responders, all the volunteers. Lubbock didn't just sit back and say, hey, it's not my problem. From the testing to vaccinations to the scheduling at the Civic Center, unbelievably, the way it was orchestrated. You walk in, you walk out. I did it for probably within 30 minutes, the wife and I did. We did some PSAs to inform the public. This is, I actually did a testimonial that I had no side effects other than a sore shoulder on the second vaccination. So we're, the city, I'm convinced the city and the city staff and everyone that has participated did such a tremendous job. Glad to be a part of it.
Councilwoman Patterson Harris.
You can call me Sheila.
Sheila, my friend Sheila. 2020, maybe appropriately among all the tough stuff of the year, I think it helped shine a light on disparities, challenges, inequities. I don't know what exactly how to describe it. You and I have had a chance to talk about this. You're proud to be Lubbock born and raised from the eastern part of our community, and you're proud of that. Like I said, but, as you talk to your constituents, as you talk to young people, what are you telling them about where Lubbock is today, and what, as you reflect back a little bit, and then maybe what the future looks like?
I think, and I have a lot of opportunities to talk with them. They surprise me sometimes. Got a call yesterday from a young man, and it's always exciting to hear their energy and their concerns. I share with them that there's opportunity for us to work together to make these different or get things to the place where we'd like for them to be. No longer is it okay for us to sit on the outside and look and just complain. We've got to get in and get our hands dirty. And whatever it is that we can bring to the table, that we make those things happen. We don't do it apart from each other. We don't do our things in different silos, but we work together to make things happen. And 2020 was definitely a time that should have taught us that thing if it did not.
You like to talk about showing up. You even have a little saying you like to talk about, and I think of it as role modeling. I think of it as being in the moment and living our life where we're planted. Talk a little bit about that.
I think it's important because it builds trust. It helps us build relationships and use those relationships that we've built to work with others to make things happen. It's important for people to feel that they can trust you, and they know where you're from, know where you've been, know what you stand for, and that if you say something, doggone it, they can believe you. My mama had a saying that if I tell you that a chicken dips snuff, you can look under his wing for a snuff cup, because I mean what I say. And it's important to do those things for people, to give them the truth, even if it's not easy to swallow. Give that to them every time, and they'll believe you.